Hello and welcome back to another video. My name is Mike Davies, and in today's tutorial I'll be showing you 7 essential tricks that I think every GIMP beginner should know. I'll be using GIMP version 2.10.24, which is the latest version of GIMP at the time of this tutorial. Before I get into that, don't forget to check out my website at daviesmediadesign.com. I have tons of free software tutorials on here as well as help articles, so definitely check that out. You can get more by becoming a DMD Premium member, and you can enroll in my GIMP 2.10 Masterclass from beginner to pro photo editing on Udemy, and I'll include a link to this as well as all the relevant links from this tutorial in the description of the video. I'll be using a couple of free photos for today's tutorial, including this one. I just went with the large size download for this, just click free download. And I also went with this free photo here, so once again, click the drop down and I went with the large size. To demonstrate these 7 essential selection tricks, I'll be creating this composition here. All right, so let's dive right in here. The first selection trick is going to be copying selections from one composition to another. This is not quite as intuitive as you would think it is inside of GIMP, but let's start off over here with the original image. I did create an outline of the main subject ahead of time here, and I did that using the foreground select tool, which you can access here inside of the third tool group. Here it is under foreground select. I do have an entire tutorial dedicated to this tool, including how to use it. So I'm not going to go through the entire process of outlining my subject, but I did save the selection area that I created from the foreground select tool as a channel. So over here in my channels tab, here we have our selection. All I have to do is come over here and click to convert this channel back to a selection. So this was the final selection I ended up with after using my foreground select tool. So let's come back over here to the layers panel. So when it comes to copying and pasting selections inside of GIMP, and I'm not talking about the pixels inside the selection area, I'm just talking about the border here, so these marching ants. So when we want to copy selections, we're going to come over here and toggle the quick mask. So there you'll see the quick mask is going to give us the area that is included inside of the selection area. I do have an entire tutorial dedicated to the quick mask tool if you want to see all of the uses for this, or pretty much the main use for this. And then we're going to come over here to the composition we want to paste our selection to. So in this case, I'm just going to use this stock photo as our example. And once again, you're going to toggle on the quick mask using the little icon here or the shortcut key Shift Q, and then you're going to hit Control V. That's going to paste your selection area here to the quick mask, but right now this is way too big. So what we're going to do is use any of our transform tools, and that's going to allow us to transform this in any way. I'm going to go with the scale tool for this example. So Shift S on the keyboard is the shortcut key for the scale tool. You can also come over here to the transformations group here inside the toolbox and just go with scale. So click and hold your mouse on this tool group and release it on scale. And you're going to want to make sure your transform mode is set to layer. And then you're going to come over here to your selection and just drag this in. And if I hold Control, it'll scale it into the center. And if I hold the Shift key, it'll maintain the original aspect ratio of the selection area. And right there, we are pretty much back to the original size relative to the stock photo we're using here as the background photo. So once I'm ready, I'll come over here and hit scale. And we can perform any other transformations to this. But when I'm ready to bring this into the composition as a selection area, all I have to do is click the icon to toggle the quick mask off. And there you can see now our selection area has been pasted into our new composition. So the next trick when it comes to GIMP selections is that you can create a selection area from any pixels on a layer. So to demonstrate this, I'm going to get started on the composition I showed you guys here at the beginning of this tutorial. So I'll hit Control N on my keyboard. That's going to bring up the Create a New Image dialog box. And I just typed 1080 by 1920 using the Tab key to go between the numerical fields here, and I'll click OK. And let's come back over here to the original image, and I'm going to toggle the quick mask off. So we're back to the selection that was created using the foreground select tool. And I'll come over here to my layers panel and make sure that my main layer is active here. Once the layer is active, I'll hit Control C. That's going to allow us to copy the pixels inside of the selection area. And then we'll come over here to our new composition, Control V to paste. So now we've pasted those pixels from our photo into our new composition. And I still have the scale tool selected. If you guys don't, just come back here to this tool group and choose the scale tool. And I'm just going to click on here, and I'm going to hold Control and Shift while I drag my mouse to scale this down. And now I'll hit scale. So right now the selection's a bit sloppy. I'm going to clean that up in a second. Let's come over here to the floating selection, and we're just going to click the create a new layer icon. That's going to put this on its own new layer. So as I mentioned, this trick is that we want to create a selection around the pixels in a layer, which in this case is going to be our model. To do that, all we need to do is Alt-click on the layer, and there you can see now we have the model here in the photo outlined. Let me hit Control-Shift-A. If that didn't work for you, you can go to Layer, Transparency, Alpha 2 Selection, and that's going to create a selection area around our model. This trick is going to work on text as well. It doesn't have to just be a photo. Just to demonstrate, let me come back over here. So this was the final composition I created. Here you'll see a layer of text. If I come over here, Alt-click on that layer, there you'll see we now have a selection area created from the text. So I'll hit Control-Shift-A to deselect that. Let's come back over here to the composition we're working on. So real quick, I'm just going to show you how to clean up the pixels here. The reason this is looking messy is that these areas outside of the selection area are actually partially selected. I do cover this in my selection area basics and selection area advanced tutorials, so definitely check that out for more information regarding why this is happening. But the way I can get rid of that is just by coming over here to my Paths tab, and I'm just going to convert the selection here to a path. And I can do that using this icon here, Selection to Path. And so there you'll see our selection is now a path. I'll hit Control-Shift-A to deselect that. And now when I convert this path back to a selection by using this icon here, which is Path to Selection. And now come over here to Select, Invert, and finally hit the Delete key. That's going to get rid of all those excess pixels. So let me just invert that back. Let's come over here to Select, Invert again. So one of the cool things here is that I can take this technique we've just used, the Alpha to Transparency technique, and I can now fill in the selection area using something like a gradient. So let's come back here to the Layers panel and come over here and click to create a new layer. And I do want to name this Model Gradient, so I'll keep that there. And we'll keep the fill width set to transparency and click OK. So now I'll hit the G key on my keyboard or grab the gradient tool here from the toolbox. And I can change the gradient inside of here to whatever colors I want. To do that, I'm going to set my foreground and background colors. So if I click on here, you'll see the light blue color I'm using is going to be using this HTML notation. You guys can type that same thing here to copy my color. And I'll come over here and you'll see this is the HTML notation for my background color, which is like a purple color. So I'll click OK. And let me come over here to the gradient itself. I'm going to change this to foreground to background, and you can go either HSV or RGB. Let's go HSV here. And the shape is set to linear, so now I'm going to click and drag this. And I can always come over here and just swap the gradient out. And once we're ready, hit the Enter key, and if it just swaps the colors like that again, hit the Enter key one more time, and just grab another tool that will apply that gradient. So I'll hit Control-Shift-A to deselect that, and I'm going to come over here and make sure I have my Move tool selected, so you can use the M key on your keyboard, and I'm just going to move this slightly to the right there and release, and come over here to the Layers panel, drag that down below, and there you can see one application of that feature. Alright, so the third selection trick for GIMP is that you can convert any active selection inside of your GIMP composition to a border. So some of you may know about the border feature. Let me come over here to the background layer. If I were to hit Control-A on my keyboard, it would select the entire composition. And I can then create a border around my document here by going to Select, Border, And I can set the border size, so let's go with 25 pixels, border style set to smooth, and click OK. So many of you are probably aware of that trick there. However, this doesn't just work on borders around your entire composition. So let me hit Control-Shift-A to deselect that. That's the same as going to select none. So now I'm going to come over here to the original layer, which right now it's called pasted layer. Let me double click on this and just rename this model, hit the Enter key. So once again, I'm going to Alt click on here. One thing you guys might remember is that some of these areas are partially selected. So I want to get rid of those partially selected areas. And I can do that easily by going to Select, Sharpen. So that's going to convert the edge here to a sharp edge as opposed to having partially selected areas, which is caused by a feathered edge. Once we've done that, let's come over here to Select, Border. And we're going to go with the 5 pixel border here and click OK. So there you'll see the outline around our model now is a border. And I can now fill this border in with any color. So let's come up top here to the model layer. Let's click to create a new layer. And I'm just going to name this model border. Hit the Enter key. And let's come over here. And I'm just going to click on the foreground color and go with this color here. So use that HTML notation if you'd like. And now I'll click and drag this color inside the border, Control-Shift-A to deselect that. And now we have a border around our model. The next selection trick in GIMP is that you can use transform tools on selection areas. So this is super useful for a variety of reasons. Maybe you want to rotate a selection area you drew, or maybe you want to scale it up or down, etc. So let me give you guys an example here. Let me come over to the second tool group and go with the Ellipse Select tool. I'll release my mouse. And I'm just going to click and drag to draw a random ellipse shape. So we have this here on our composition, and now let's say we want to rotate this. We can't use the existing handles that are on here right now. However, I can hit Shift-R on my keyboard, which will grab the Rotate tool. And now you'll see here under the Rotate tool options, we have the Transform option, and I can change this to Selection. And now I can click and drag my mouse and rotate this. You can also manually type in a value or use the bar here. And I'll come over here and click Rotate. So now, as you can see, I've rotated this selection area, and let me just fill this in. So I'll come over here to the background layer, click to create a new layer, and I'll name this Ellipse Pattern. Hit the Enter key, and Shift-B on the keyboard will bring up the Bucket Fill tool here. And I'll make sure the fill type for me is set to Pattern Fill. I'm using dot pattern 29, which is actually a dot pattern from my patterns pack. This is available to my DMD premium members, so definitely check that out if you're interested in downloading this dot pattern pack. And now using my bucket fill tool, I'll click to fill this in, and I'll hit Control-Shift-A. That will deselect that. So now we have a cool pattern behind here. The next selection trick is that you can actually use selections as frames inside of GIMP. This is super easy. So let's say we wanted to bring in a photo, but we wanted that photo to have a sort of geometric frame. All I have to do is use any of GIMP's selection tools to create a selection area. So in this case, let's go with the Free Select tool here. You can see the shortcut key for that is F. And now I'm going to draw the shape I want for my frame. So I'm just going to click to create nodes here using this tool. And make sure I close this out. And I'll hit the Enter key to apply that. So here we have our selection area. I'm going to bring a photo in to fill this selection area in as if this were a frame. The first thing I want to do though is I want to create a new layer that the photo is going to be on. So let's come back here to the background layer and create a new layer. And I'm just going to name this Photo Frame. Hit the Enter key. So now let's come back over to this image here, and I have the selection area here from the earlier part of this tutorial. I'll hit Control-Shift-A to get rid of that, or go to Select None. So I'll hit Control-C to copy this, and let's come back over here to our composition. Now if I want to use this selection area as a frame, I can go to Edit, Paste into Selection. So now we've pasted this photo here. You'll see the main issue is that this is not going to fit inside the frame. One downside to this is that GIMP does not allow you to scale your image up or down once you have pasted it here. You actually have to do that ahead of time as of right now. So let me hit Control Z. I'm not going to scale the image up or down, but I am going to rotate it. So I'll come back to this image and we'll go to Image, Transform, and then rotate 90 degrees clockwise. And now I'll hit Control C again and come back over here. Edit, paste into selection. And by the way, if Control C doesn't work, you can just go to Edit Copy there. But I'll come over here to paste into selection. And although you cannot scale this, you can move this. So let's come over here and grab the Move tool. So I can move this into place if I want to change the positioning of it. And then once I'm ready, I'm going to come over here to the floating selection that is created, and I'm going to anchor this to the layer below. So I'll just click the little anchor icon, and that basically merges that with the photo frame layer below. And now we have our photo here inside of the selection frame. So I'll hit Control-Shift-A to deselect that. All right, so that's super simple. The next selection trick found inside of GIMP is that you can convert your selection areas to guides. This can be super useful whenever you are trying to align certain objects to the selection area. So for example, in this case, we're going to align some text to the original selection area we created here, or the selection area of the model. So let's come back here to the original model layer. Let's say we wanted to align text to this model. I'll come over here, Alt-click on here. That's going to create our selection area. And again, some of these areas are partially selected, so to prevent creating guides in the wrong location, I'm just going to go to Select, Sharpen. So once I've done that, now I'll come over here to Image, Guides, New Guides from Selection. So there you can see now we have guides created along that selection, and I'll hit Control-Shift-A to deselect that. Now let's come over here, grab the text tool. And I have this set to Monster at Bold. That's a free font I downloaded. I do have an entire tutorial dedicated to downloading and installing fonts for GIMP. I have both a Windows and a Mac version, so definitely check that out. But now with my text tool, I'm just going to click on my composition, and with the caps lock key on, I'm just going to type GIMP is free. And I do want to scale this text up a bit, so I'll hit Control-A to select all the text. And I'll come over here to this little text box. Let's go with 100 for that. Let's come over here to the toolbox and grab the rotate tool. We're going to change the mode of this back to the original layer mode since we changed it to selection earlier. And I'm just going to rotate this while holding the Control and Shift key and hit rotate. And now I'm going to grab the Move tool from the toolbox, making sure I'm hovered over the pixels in the text. I can move this over. And now you can see we can align this to that guide we created. So we can snap it to the guide like so, or if we want the actual text aligned with this guide and not just the text box, we can click once on the text there and use the arrow keys on the keyboard and have those align. All right, so the seventh and final selection trick found inside of GIMP is that you can actually use your selection areas as a crop tool. Obviously, this has a variety of uses, but it just means that you can crop your images to whatever selection areas you want. So for example, let's say we wanted to crop this image so that it perfectly fit the size of the model here. What I can do is Alt-click on that model layer, and let's just click on this layer to make it our active layer. And again, there are partially selected areas here, so let's just go to Select, Sharpen to make sure that those are taken care of. And now to crop to this selection, I'll go to Image, Crop to Selection, and that will crop everything down to our selection area. I'm going to hit Control-Z though to back up because I don't want that change to be permanent there. I want to undo that change, and I'll hit Control-Shift-A to deselect that. So that's pretty much it for these selection area tips, but I am going to apply the finishing touches to this so that it looks the way it looked originally. And mostly what I did was I just added some layer modes to all these layers. So let's come up here to the model border layer, and we're going to change this to divide. Come over here to photo frame, and we're going to change this layer mode. And let's also come up to the model gradient layer. And finally, let's come down here to the background layer. And I'm just going to change the color here. So let's go with this light blue. Click OK. Hit the G key to grab the gradient tool, and we'll change this. We'll go foreground and background with the hard edge there. With the shape set to linear, let's now click and drag to draw this. And let's just swap the colors. And I'll hit the Enter key to apply that. And finally, I'll go to Image, Guides, remove all guides, and there's our final composition. All right, so that's it for this tutorial. Hopefully you liked it. If you did, don't forget to like the video, subscribe to my channel, and click the bell icon to be notified each time I have a brand new tutorial. You can check out any of the links to my resources in the description of the video. But thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.